Azerbaijan Republic. Capital, Baku. Flag, 3 equal horizontal bands of blue, top, red, and green, a crescent and 8-pointed star in white are centered in the red band. Anthem, Azerbaijan National Anthem, composed by Uzir Hijabov. Monetary unit, the manat, consisting of 100 kopek, was introduced in 1992 and remains tied to the Russian ruble with widely fluctuating exchange rates. 1 manat equals $0.00021, or $1 equals 4,794.15 manat, as of 2005. Weights and measures, the metric system is in force. Holidays, New Year's Day, 1st of January, International Women's Day, 8th of March, Novruz Bayram, Holiday of Spring, 22nd of March, Day of the Republic, 28th of May, Day of Armed Forces, 9th of October, Day of State Sovereignty, 18th of October, Day of National Revival, 17th of November, Universal Azeri Solidarity Day, 31st of December. Time, 4 p.m. equals noon GMT. Location, size, and extent. Azerbaijan is located in southeastern Europe, southwestern Asia between Armenia and the Caspian Sea. Comparatively, Azerbaijan is slightly smaller than the state of Maine with a total area of 86,600 square kilometers, 33,436 square miles. This area includes the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic and the Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast. Azerbaijan shares boundaries with Russia on the N, the Caspian Sea on the E, Iran on the S, Armenia on the W, and Georgia on the NW. Azerbaijan's boundary length totals 2,013 kilometers, 1,251 miles. Azerbaijan's capital city, Baku, is located on the Absheron Peninsula that juts into the Caspian Sea. Topography. The topography of Azerbaijan features the large, flat Aros lowland, much of it below sea level, surrounded on 3 sides by mountains. The Great Caucasus Mountains are to the north, the Lesser Caucasus Mountains are to the southwest, and the Talish Mountains are in the south along the border with Iran. The Karabakh upland lies in the west. About 19% of Azerbaijan's land is arable with approximately 16% under irrigation. The Nakhchivan exclave lies to the west, separated from the rest of Azerbaijan by Armenia. Nakhchivan also shares borders with Turkey and Iran. Climate. The country's climate is subtropical in the eastern and central parts. In the mountainous regions the climate is alpine-like. The southeastern section of the country has a humid subtropical climate. The average temperature in the capital, Baku, in July is 25 degrees Celsius, 77 degrees Fahrenheit. In January the average temperature is 4 degrees Celsius, 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Rainfall varies according to climate zones. The average rainfall for most of the country is only about 15 to 25 centimeters, 6 to 10 in. However, at the highest elevations of the Caucasus and in the Loncran lowlands, annual rainfall can exceed 100 centimeters, 39 in. Flora and fauna. The country's flora and fauna is rich and varied. There are 16 nature reserves and more than 28 forest reserves and hunting farms. Environment. Azerbaijan's current environmental problems result in part from the effects of the economic priorities and practices of the former Soviet Union. General mismanagement of the country's resources has resulted in a serious threat to several areas of the environment. UN agencies have reported severe air and water pollution in Azerbaijan, which ranks among the 50 nations with the world's highest level of carbon dioxide emissions. The combination of industrial, agricultural, and oil drilling pollution has created an environmental crisis in the Caspian Sea. These sources of pollution have contaminated 100% of the coastal waters in some areas and 45.3% of Azerbaijan's rivers. In 2001, only 78% of the total population had access to safe drinking water. The pollution of the land through the indiscriminate use of agricultural chemicals such as the pesticide DDT is also a serious problem. Azerbaijan's war with Armenia has hampered the government's ability to improve the situation. Due to the severity of pollution on all levels, the country's wildlife and vegetation are also seriously affected. From the mid-1980s to mid-1990s, the amount of forest and woodland declined by 12.5%. As of 2000, about 13% of the total land area was forested. In 2003, about 6.1% of the total land area was protected, including 2 Ramsar wetland sites, Agland Geisel Agage. As of 2002, there were at least 99 species of mammals, 229 species of birds, and 4,300 species of higher plants. According to a 2006 report issued by the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, IUCN, threatened species included 11 types of mammals, 11 species of birds, 5 types of reptiles, 5 species of fish, and 6 other invertebrates. Endangered species include the barbel sturgeon, beluga, the Azov Black Sea sturgeon, the Apollo butterfly, and the Armenian birch mouse. Population. The population of Azerbaijan in 2005 was estimated by the United Nations, UN, at 8,388,000, which placed it at number 90 in population among the 193 nations of the world. In 2005, approximately 7% of the population was over 65 years of age, with another 26% of the population under 15 years of age. There were 94 males for every 100 females in the country. According to the UN, the annual population rate of change for 2005 to 10 was expected to be 1.0%, a rate the government viewed as satisfactory. The projected population for the year 2025 was 9,700,000. The population density was 97 per square kilometer, 251 per square mile. The UN estimated that 51% of the population lived in urban areas in 2005, and that urban areas were growing at an annual rate of 1.15%. The capital city, Baku, had a population of 1,816,000 in that year. Other urban centers include Jayanja, formerly Kirovabad, with a population of about 300,000 people, and Samgate with about 289,700. There has been an additional influx of foreign refugees to the urban centers in recent years. Migration. As a result of the war with Armenia, which started in 1988, more than 1 million people were forced to leave the region. The law on citizenship allows for the automatic acquisition of Azerbaijani citizenship by refugees from Armenia. Also, there are some 48,000 Meshkashans, also known as Meskas, who were forcibly resettled from Central Asia after bloody Soviet pogroms in 1989. The Meshkashans, descendants of rural Muslim populations, were originally deported from Georgia to Central Asia under the Stalin era. Most Azerbaijani were displaced between 1993 and 1994. Since May 1994, when the ceasefire was enacted, only 60,000 persons were able to return to their homes along the front line. According to United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, data, as of the end of 2004 there were 578,545, around 7% of the total population, internally displaced persons, IDP, in Azerbaijan. Between 1989 and 1995, there was an emigration of Slavic peoples from Azerbaijan. These included 169,000 Russians, 15,000 Ukrainians, and 3,000 Belarusians as they emigrated back to their homelands. By the end of 2004, several thousand Azerbaijan citizens sought asylum in Western Europe, mainly in Sweden and Germany. As of 2001 there were 148,000 migrants living in Azerbaijan, with less than 1% of these being refugees. However, as of 2004, Azerbaijan hosted 40,267 other refugees and asylum seekers. Most are Azeri refugees from Armenia. In 2005 the net migration rate was estimated as -4.64 migrants per 1,000. The government views this migration level as satisfactory. Ethnic groups. At the 1999 census, 90.6% of the population was Azeri. About 2.2% were Dagestani, 1.8% were Russian, another 1.5% were Armenian, and 3.9% were of other ethnic origins. Almost all Armenians live in the separatist Nagorno-Karabakh region. Languages. Azerbaijani, or Azeri, is a language related to Turkish and is also spoken in northwestern Iran. It is traditionally written in Arabic script. In 1995, an estimated 89% of the population spoke Azeri, 3% spoke Russian, 2% spoke Armenian, and 6% other. In 1939, the Soviets introduced a Cyrillic alphabet, with 8 special characters. Religions. For most of the 20th century, from 1920 to 1991, the Azerbaijan Soviet Socialist Republic observed the restrictions in religious belief and practice common throughout the former Soviet Union. According to official figures available in 2004, the population was 96% Muslim, 70% of whom were Shias, and 30% were Sunnis. However, the percentage of those who are active practitioners of the faith is believed to be much lower. Religious identity within the country tends to be primarily based on culture and ethnicity. Because of the Persian influence on Azerbaijan, most Azerbaijanis are Shiites, even though all of the other Turkic groups of the former Soviet Union are Sunni Muslims. Islam, both Shia and Sunni, Russian Orthodox, and Judaism are considered to be traditional religions of the country. A majority of Christians live in the Baku and Sumgait urban areas. There are 2 main groups of Jews, the Mountain Jews, who are believed to be descendants of those who first came to the northern part of the country over 2,000 years ago, and the Ashkenazi Jews, who are the descendant of European immigrants. There are small communities of evangelical Lutherans, Roman Catholics, Baptists, Molikans, an older branch of Russian Orthodox, Seventh-day Adventists, Baha'is, Wahhabist Muslims, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Hare Krishnas. The Constitution specifically provides that persons of all faiths may choose and practice their religion without restrictions. There are legal provisions which allow the government to regulate religious groups. All religious groups must be registered with the government through the State Committee for Work with Religious Associations, a department of the Ministry of Justice. Proselytizing by foreigners is against the law. Muslims who convert to non-Muslim faiths often face social discrimination, and even hostilities. Transportation. Azerbaijan's railway system, as of 2004, was made up of 2,957 kilometers, 1,839 miles, of broad gauge, 1.520-meter, track, with Baku as the hub. Of that total, 1,278 kilometers, 795 miles, was electrified. In 2003, the highway system totaled 27,016 kilometers, 16,803 miles, of which 12,698 kilometers, 7,898 miles, were paved. In that same year, there were 128 kilometers, 80 miles, of expressways. As of 2003, there were 350,559 passenger cars and 124,482 commercial vehicles registered. Azerbaijan's major port is at Baku. In 2005 the merchant marine had 81 ships, 1,000 GRT or over, totaling 253,004 GRT. Ships from the Caspian fleet have called at some 125 ports in over 30 countries. In 2004 there were an estimated 50 airports. As of 2005, a total of 27 had paved runways, and there were also 2 heliports. There are flights from Baku's Bina Airport to more than 70 cities of the former Soviet Union. In 2003, a total of 684,000 passengers were carried on scheduled domestic and international airline flights. History. The territory of present-day Azerbaijan has been continuously inhabited since the Paleolithic era. The first evidence of tribal alliances date to the first millennium BC, when such peoples as the Mannaians, the Medes, the Cadusiis, the Albanoi, and the Caspians appeared. In the 7th century BC, the state of Media appeared in what now is southern Azerbaijan, growing to cover large portions of the Near East. The Medians were displaced by the Persian dynasty of Achaemenids, who in turn were defeated by Alexander the Great. In the 4th century BC, another state arose which Greek sources called Atropatena, or Land of the Fire Keepers. It is this name, reflecting the predominance of Zoroastrianism, which may have given the present state its name. Around the beginning of the Common Era, Atropatena was succeeded by a state called Albania, which the Romans attempted to conquer. In the 3rd and 4th centuries Azerbaijan existed with fluent boundaries between the Sassanid state in Persia and the Romans, whose battles inflicted great damage, leaving Azerbaijan open to raids by Turkic nomadic tribes from the north, including Khazars and Huns. Outside influence reappeared in the 7th and 8th centuries, when Arabs conquered much of Transcaucasia. As their influence receded, a number of small local states were established, the best known of which was the Shirvanshahs. In the 11th century Azerbaijan was invaded by Oghuz Turks, of the Seljuk dynasty. By the 13th century the gradual displacement of pre-Turkic local languages was complete, although many traces of non-Turkic predecessors remain in the Azerbaijani language. Persian, however, remained the language of art, science, and education. In the 1230s Azerbaijan was conquered by Genghis Khan, whose power remained in the Ilkhanid state, which at the end of the 14th century was displaced by the armies of Tamerlane. In the 16th century, the Safavid state emerged, coming to control most of the land between the Sirdarya and the Euphrates, and re-establishing agriculture and commerce destroyed under the Mongols. In the 17th century, the Safavids became Persianized, which made present-day Azerbaijan decline in importance. In the 18th century Azerbaijan became the intersection of the Turkish, Persian, and Russian empires, as well as the focus of British and French attempts to block Russian expansion. The northern part of the territory was incorporated into Russia in the first third of the 19th century, but the area did not become important until the 1880s, when the area's abundant oil gained commercial importance. The southern portion of what was originally Azerbaijan has remained in Iran, except for the period 1941 to 46, when it was occupied by Soviet troops. When the 1917 Russian Revolution came, Ottoman Turkish troops moved into Azerbaijan, and later British forces controlled the capital, Baku. The Azerbaijani Mizvat, or Equality Party, established a government, declared Azerbaijan's independence, and received diplomatic recognition from the several states. Azerbaijan was invaded by the Russian Bolsheviks' Red Army in April 1920, and Azerbaijan was declared a Soviet state. In 1922 it was made part of the Transcaucasian Federated Socialist Republic, along with Georgia and Armenia. That was dissolved in 1936, when the three states were each made into separate Soviet Socialist republics. In 1988, calls by ethnic Armenians living in Azerbaijan's Nagorno-Karabakh (NK) region to be incorporated into the Armenian Republic led to open conflict, which lasted until 1994. This predominantly Armenian area had been unsuccessfully claimed by the Armenians in the 1920s, at the time of the creation of Soviet Azerbaijan. Inability to solve the NK conflict was one of the problems that ultimately brought down Mikhail Gorbachev and broke apart the USSR. Ethnic and civil violence in January 1990 prompted the occupation of Baku by Soviet armed forces and Moscow's replacement of Abdulrahman Vezirov with Ayats Mulabov as republic head. During this period of martial law, the legislature elected Mulabov as president in May 1990. Independence was declared on August 30, 1991, and Mulabov was reaffirmed as president in a popular, uncontested election in September 1991. In December 1991, NK's Armenians held a referendum, boycotted by local Azerbaijanis, that approved NK's independence and elected a Supreme Soviet, which on January 6, 1992, declared NK's independence and futilely appealed for world recognition. Following a late February 1992 massacre of Azerbaijani civilians in the town of Khojaly in NK, Mulabov was accused of failing to protect Azeri citizens and forced by the nationalist oppositionist Azerbaijani Popular Front, APF, and others to resign as president. His replacement, legislative head Achaemenids, was also forced to resign in May 1992, in the face of further Azerbaijani military defeats in NK. Mutabov was then reinstated by loyalists in the Supreme Soviet, but he had to flee 2 days later, when the APF seized power. Former Soviet dissident and APF leader Abulfaz Elchibey was elected president in a popular contest in June 1992. The nationalist government took several moves to cut its ties to Russia, including demanding the withdrawal of Russian troops, refusing to participate as a member of the Commonwealth of Independent States, negotiating with Western firms to develop its oil resources, and improving relations with Turkey. However, military losses in NK increased. In 1993, Heydar Aliyev, who had been the Communist Party leader of the Republic from 1971 to 85 but then was ousted and disgraced by Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, began to press for Elchibey's dismissal. An abortive attempt by the Elchibey government in June 1993 to disarm paramilitary forces in the town of Ganja precipitated the fall of the government and provided the opportunity for Aliyev to regain power. These forces were led by Shurt Husinov, formerly in charge of troops in NK, who had been fired by Elchibey. Husinov's forces, supplied with Russian equipment, defeated an Azerbaijani army attack and began to march on Baku. His government in chaos, Elchibey invited Aliyev to come to Baku, and on 15 June, he endorsed Aliyev's election by the legislature as its new speaker. Elchibey fled to the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic, NAR, on 17 June. On June 24, 1993, a bare quorum of legislators met and formally stripped Elchibey of presidential powers, transferring them to Aliyev. Husinov demanded and was given the post of prime minister. On October 3, 1993, Aliyev was elected president with 98.8% of the vote. The referendum and election were viewed as not free and fair by many international observers because of suppression of APF and other opposition participation. In late September 1994, police and others in Baku launched a purported coup attempt. Aliyev darkly hinted at Russian involvement. After defeating the coup attempt, Aliyev also accused Prime Minister Husinov of major involvement, and Husinov fled the country. Other coup attempts were reported in 1995 and 1999. All of the alleged coup attempts triggered mass arrests of Aliyev's opponents. On October 11, 1998, incumbent President Aliyev defeated 5 other candidates and was elected to a second 5-year term, receiving over 76% of 4.3 million votes cast. The major constructive opposition candidate running was Adibar Mammadov of the National Independence Party, NIP, who received 11.6% of the vote. Most international observers judged the vote not free and fair, citing myriad irregularities, though also noting that the election marked some improvement in political pluralism. The conflict with Armenian separatists over its Nagorno-Karabakh region continues to plague Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan asserts that NK forces occupy over 20% of Azerbaijan's territory both in and around NK. The conflict has resulted in about 30,000 casualties on both sides and over 840,000 Azerbaijani refugees and displaced persons, and over 300,000 Armenians. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, began the Minsk Group peace talks in June 1992. A Russian-mediated ceasefire was agreed to in May 1994 and was formalized by an armistice signed by the Ministers of Defense of Armenia and Azerbaijan and the commander of the NK Army on July 27, 1994, and reaffirmed a month later. Moscow talks were held by the sides, with token representation by the OSCE, along with Minsk Group talks. With strong U.S. backing, the OSCE at its Budapest meeting agreed in December 1994 to send OSCE peacekeepers to the region under UN aegis if a political settlement could be reached. Russia and the OSCE assented to merge their mediation efforts. France was nominated as a co-chair in 1996. This elicited criticism from Azerbaijan that the French had appeared pro-Armenian, leading to the seating of U.S., French, and Russian co-chairs. Many Azerbaijanis also have voiced reservations about Russia's objectivity as a mediator, citing its defense ties to Armenia. Direct Armenian-Azerbaijani contacts by the presidents and advisors have also occurred. Prospects for a negotiated settlement remain elusive because the sides remain far apart on most substantive issues such as the placement and composition of a peacekeeping force and NK's ultimate political status. Personal meetings by the two presidents raised hopes that a statement of intention could be issued at the November 1999 OSCE summit, but events such as resignations of some Azerbaijani officials apparently opposed to NK proposals, Aliyev's infirmity, and October 1999 assassinations in Armenia appeared to set back progress. Peace talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan were held in Paris and Florida in 2001, but by December 2002, Lieutenant General Seyran Ohanian, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of NK, warned Azerbaijan that the enclave's army was better prepared than ever before and ready to repulse the enemy and carry out a successful counteroffensive should conflict begin. President Aliyev in September 2002 told representatives of the Minsk group that the people's mood is changing. They are starting to lose hope in a peaceful solution and are coming to the view that we have to recover our land ourselves by whatever means necessary. It has been nearly 10 years since the Minsk group was created. How much longer can we go on talking about a peace settlement? In 2001, the United States lifted a ban on aid imposed during the NK conflict after Azerbaijan provided airspace and intelligence to the United States following the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. In September 2002, construction began on a multi-billion-dollar pipeline to carry Caspian oil from Azerbaijan to Turkey via Georgia, the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, otherwise known as the BTC. The government held a referendum on August 24, 2002 to approve 39 changes to the constitution. Some of the major articles at issue were the abolishment of the proportional system of election of deputies to the national parliament, making the prime minister, not the speaker of the parliament, a caretaker president in case the president is not able to carry out his duties, and giving lower-level courts the right to ban political parties. Opposition leaders argued that abolishment of the proportional system would damage the multi-party system in the country and further strengthen the ruling elite. In addition to this, the opposition claimed that President Aliyev intended to appoint his son Ilham prime minister and then retire, thus paving the way for his son to become the next president. President Aliyev also approved adding a provision to the law on state secrets, which would make editors and journalists of local mass media accountable for disseminating state secrets. The government claimed that there was nearly 100% support for the constitutional changes with 88% voter turnout, while opposition groups stated turnout was closer to 15%, which would render the vote invalid. Demonstrators called for the resignation of President Aliyev and for holding free and fair elections. Supporters of more than 30 opposition parties, including the major parties Mizvat, the Popular Front, the Azerbaijan Democratic Party, and the Azerbaijan National Independence Party, held marches on September 14, 2002 urging the authorities to cancel the results of the referendum. On 27 October and again on 24 November of that year, the opposition parties marched again under the banner of the United Opposition Movement, claiming that over 50,000 people participated in the marches. In August 2003, Aliyev appointed his son Ilham prime minister. In October, Ilham Aliyev won a presidential vote by a landslide in a poll outside observers declared not meeting international standards, which sparked opposition protests. These were met by police violence. Hundreds were arrested. In December, Haider Aliyev died in a hospital in Cleveland, Ohio, in the United States. He had been suffering from heart and kidney problems. In March 2005, outspoken opposition journalist Elmer Huseynov was shot and killed in Baku. Thousands of Azerbaijanis mourned his death. After months of pre-election tension and the suppression of riots, voters cast their ballots for parliament on November 6, 2005. The ruling Yeni Azerbaijan party declared victory, while leaders of Azadlik, Freedom, a three-party opposition bloc, said the official results were a sham, and the races were tainted by fraud. falsification, and police action. During the campaign, beatings of demonstrators, arrests of opposition figures, and the continued use of government resources for its candidates took place. After the elections, thousands of opposition members protested the fraudulent elections, and the Azeri government was forced, in part by intense diplomatic pressure, to undo some of the most obviously falsified results, by firing 2 regional governors for interfering with vote counts, annulling the results for 5 parliamentary seats, and dismissing several election officials and opening criminal cases against them, in addition to carrying out investigations of complaints. The official results showed the Yeni Azerbaijan party winning 58 parliamentary seats and the Azadlik bloc only 11. The rest were scattered among small parties and independents. Tens of thousands of citizens staged peaceful protests on November 26, 2005, calling on President Ilham Aliyev to resign, and chanting freedom. The protests were broken up by the police, who beat many of the participants. Government. Azerbaijan is a republic with a presidential form of government. Heydar Aliyev assumed presidential powers after the overthrow of his popularly elected predecessor and was elected president in 1993. Aliyev and his supporters from his home region of Nakhchivan and elsewhere dominated the government and the legislature. Aliyev's son Ilham was elected president in October 2003. Heydar Aliyev died in December 2003. The Azerbaijani constitution was approved by 91.9% of voters in a referendum held in November 1995. It establishes a strong presidency, sets up a new 125-member legislature, the Milli Majlis, declares Azerbaijani the state language, proclaims freedom of religion and a secular state, stipulates ownership over part of the Caspian Sea, and gives Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic, NAR, quasi-federal rights. The president appoints and removes cabinet ministers, the Milli Majlis consents to his choice of prime minister, submits budgetary and other legislation that cannot be amended but only approved or rejected within 56 days, and appoints local officials. It is extremely difficult for the Milli Majlis to impeach the president. The transition to democracy has been impeded by government efforts to hinder the opposition. In NK, political turmoil and war damage have slowed development, and ethnic Azerbaijanis are prevented from returning to the region and surrounding areas by the lack of a peace settlement. In June 2002, the Constitutional Court ruled that changes to the constitution proposed by President Heydar Aliyev did not conflict with the principles of Azerbaijan's basic law. One major change in the constitution concerned what happens if the president retires or becomes incapacitated. Prior to the August 24, 2002 referendum, under the Constitution's Article 105, the Speaker of Parliament assumed the President's duties. Under the new rule, the Prime Minister, who is appointed by the President and is responsible to him, not the legislature, assumes presidential powers. An amendment to Article 101 changed the threshold for a candidate to be elected president in the first round of voting, from 2/3 to a simple majority. Members of the Milli Majlis were previously elected on the basis of majority and proportional election systems under Article 83 of the Constitution. Under the new provisions, proportional party lists were eliminated and deputies are elected only through winning majorities in districts. Changes to Article 3 forbid holding a referendum on issues that fall under the scope of executive institutions, such as taxes, the state budget, amnesties, elections and appointments to executive positions. In the November 1995 election, 25 of the seats were allocated through a proportional party list vote and 100 through single-member district balloting. 8 parties were allowed to take part in the party list voting in the legislative elections, but only the Azerbaijani Popular Front, APF, was clearly an anti-Aliyev party. These were the Yeni, New, Azerbaijan, YAP, APF, Azerbaijan Democratic Independence, ADIP, National Independence, NIP, Azerbaijan Democratic Proprietors, ADPP, Motherland, Azerbaijan National Statehood, NSPA, and Alliance for Azerbaijan parties. Aliyev's YAP won most seats in the legislative races. The elections were marred by the harassment and exclusion of most opposition parties and candidates from participation and by rampant irregularities such as the open stuffing of ballot boxes, according to international observers. Some observers stressed that the elections marked some progress in holding a multi-party vote. Heydar Aliyev's YAP candidates ran unopposed in many electoral districts because of the exclusion of opposition candidates. Campaign advertising by most parties was severely restricted on state-owned television, while Heydar Aliyev received extensive positive coverage. Legislative elections held in November 2000 saw the NAP and its allies win 108 out of 125 seats in the Milli Majlis in elections that were criticized by international observers. The APF took the next highest number of seats with 6. The next legislative elections were held in November 2005. Due to the 2002 changes in the constitution approved by referendum, all 125 members of parliament were elected from single-mandate constituencies. Amid accusations of fraud and public demonstrations, the government's official results showed the YAP winning 58 seats, the Azadlik, Freedom, bloc won only 11 seats, and the rest were awarded to independents and split among the smaller parties. Political parties. Some 36 parties are registered, but some opposition parties have been arbitrarily refused registration. Some parties that are deemed explicitly ethnic or religiously based also have been refused registration. Under election legislation passed after Heydar Aliyev's accession, a party must have at least 1,000 members to be legally registered. Party membership is forbidden to government officials and agencies of the judiciary, law enforcement, security, border defense, customs, taxation, finance, and the state-run media. 6 pro-Aliyev parties participated in the 1995 legislative party list vote, including Yeni Azerbaijan, YAP, formed in November 1992, Azerbaijan Democratic Independence, ADIP, broke off from NIP in late 1993, Motherland, formed in 1990, and the Democratic Entrepreneurs Party, formed in 1994. Only the YAP gained enough votes to win seats in the party list vote, though these other parties won seats in constituency balloting. 2 centrist or opposition parties participated and won seats in the party list voting, the Azerbaijan Popular Front, APF formed in 1988, and National Independence Party, NIP, broke off from APF in early 1992. Opposition parties excluded from the party list ballot included Mizvat, formed in 1912. All parties are small, YAP is the largest. YAP, formed by Aliyev, encompasses many of his former Azerbaijani Communist Party, ACP, supporters. The APF was at the forefront of the nationalist and anti-communist movement, and its chair, Abulfazl Chabay, was elected president in 1992. With Heydar Aliyev's return to power, APF members and officials were arrested and harassed. NIP views itself as a moderate nationalist party in constructive opposition to Aliyev. Mizvat has supported close ties with Turkey and has cooperated on some issues with the APF. The pro-Iranian Islamic Party was stripped of its registration in 1995. Preparing for the 1998 presidential race, in March 1998, 46 pro-government political parties and groups formed the Center for Democratic Elections, CDE. 5 prominent opposition political leaders and others formed the Movement for Democratic Elections and Electoral Reform, MDER. In May 1998, El Chabay, the AFP, Isa Gambar, Mizvat, Lala Shavkat Hijayeva, Azerbaijan Liberal Party or ALP, former Speaker Rasul Gulayev, and Ilham Ismailov, Democratic Party of Azerbaijan. The Democratic Party finally achieved registration in early 2000, but co-leader Gulayev remained in forced exile. Other political parties include the Civil Solidarity Party, CSP, Civic Union Party, Compatriot Party, Justice Party, Liberal Party of Azerbaijan, and the Social Democratic Party of Azerbaijan, SDP. Opposition parties regularly factionalize and form new parties. The opposition bloc that fielded candidates in the November 2005 parliamentary election was called Azadlik, Freedom. Heydar Aliyev died in December 2003. Prior to his death he had appointed his son Ilham prime minister. In October 2003 Ilham Aliyev was elected president to succeed his father. Local government. Soviet-era Azerbaijan was subdivided administratively into one autonomous republic, Nakhchivan, an area separated from the rest of Azerbaijan by a thin strip of Armenian territory, which had its own parliament of 110 members, and an autonomous region, Nagorno-Karabakh, NK. Azerbaijan dissolved NK status as an autonomous region in November 1991 in an attempt to reassert central control. NK has claimed an independent existence since December 1991, and a swath of territory around it has been occupied by NK Armenian forces. Azerbaijan has 59 districts, rayons, and 11 cities, whose executive heads or mayors are appointed and dismissed by the president. Although the constitution called for the local election of legislative assemblies, councils, by the end of 1997, these elections did not take place until December 1999, with runoffs in some municipalities in March 2000. In these races, nearly 2,700 municipal and district assemblies were formed. Some 36,000 candidates contested for 22,087 seats in these assemblies. Of these candidates, 18,000 were sponsored by 26 political parties, while others run as independents. The election was not viewed by many international monitors as free and fair because of government interference in the electoral process, including the stacking of territorial and precinct electoral commissions with members of the ruling party and other local government supporters, the harassment or disqualification of opposition candidates, and ballot box stuffing. Many of the local assemblies found it difficult to begin work because their roles were somewhat unclear, and local executive heads, appointed by Heydar Aliyev, proved somewhat reluctant to share power. Local elections were held once again in December 2004. In all, 38,041 candidates competed to contest 21,622 seats on 2,731 municipal councils. More than 22,000 of the candidates were registered Yeni Azerbaijan Party (YAP) members. 30 other parties registered only 2,347 candidates. The major opposition parties, with the exception of the NIP, boycotted the vote. Voting irregularities were reported by outside observers. The YAP maintained its political monopoly in the municipal councils.
Judicial system. The old Soviet court system has been essentially retained, consisting of district courts and municipal courts of first instance and a Supreme Court which usually performs the function of appellate review. However, the Supreme Court also performs the function of court of first instance for some serious cases. District courts consist of one judge and two lay assessors and hear criminal, civil, and juvenile cases. Criminal defendants have the right to an attorney and to appointed counsel, the right to be present at trial, to confront witnesses, and to a public trial. The 1995 Constitution provides for public trials in most cases, the presumption of innocence in criminal cases, and the defendant's right to legal counsel. Both defendants and prosecutors have the right of appeal. In practice, however, the courts are politically oriented, seeming to overlook the government's human rights violations. In July 1993, Heydar Aliyev ousted the Supreme Court Chief Justice because of alleged political loyalties to the opposition. The president directly appoints lower-level judges. The president also appoints the Constitutional Court and Supreme Court judges with confirmation by the legislature. Prosecutors, procurators, are appointed by the president with confirmation by the legislature. The Minister of Justice organizes prosecutors into offices at the district, municipal, and republic levels. The Constitution provides equal status for prosecutors and defense attorneys before the courts, but in practice the arrest and investigatory powers of the prosecutors have dominant influence before the courts. Judges will often remand a case for further prosecutory investigation rather than render an innocent verdict. Investigations often rely on obtaining confessions rather than on gathering evidence. The Azerbaijan government's human rights record is poor, although some public policy debate is allowed and human rights organizations operate. The government restricts freedom of assembly, religion, and association. Numerous cases of arbitrary arrest, beatings, some resulting in deaths, unwarranted searches and seizures, and other human rights abuses are reported. Political oppositionalists are harassed and arrested, and there are dozens of political prisoners in Azerbaijan. The conflict between Armenians and Azerbaijanis contributed to widespread human rights violations by both sides. Some opposition newspapers are allowed to exist. Ethnic lesbians in Talish have complained of human rights abuses such as restricted educational opportunities in their native languages. Armed forces. Azerbaijan had 66,490 active personnel in its armed forces in 2005. Reserves included 300,000 members who had been in the military within the past 15 years. The Navy numbered 1,750 active personnel, which operated 6 patrol, coastal craft, 5 mine warfare vessels, 4 amphibious landing craft, and 2 logistics support vessels. The Army consisted of 56,840 personnel with equipment that included 220 main battle tanks, 127 armored infantry fighting vehicles, 468 armored personnel carriers, and 270 artillery pieces. The Air Force and Air Defense Services had a combined 7,900 active personnel with 47 combat-capable aircraft, including 37 fighters, 15 fighter ground attack aircraft, and 15 attack helicopters. Azerbaijan also had an estimated 15,000 people serving in 2 separate paramilitary units, a 10,000-plus militia, and a border guard with an estimated strength of 5,000. The defense budget for 2005 was $310 million. International cooperation. Azerbaijan was admitted to the UN on March 2, 1992 and serves on several specialized agencies, such as the FAO, IAEA, IFC, ILO, IMF, UNESCO, and the World Bank. The country is also a member of the Black Sea Cooperation Group, BSEC, the Asian Development Bank, Council of Europe, OZ, 1992, EBRD, Economic Cooperation Organization, Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, Russia, the Central Asian States, and Afghanistan, the Islamic Development Bank, the Organization of the Islamic Conference, and the European Atlantic Partnership Council. The country is also a member of the CIS and has observer status in the WTO. Azerbaijan is part of the group known as GUM, Georgia, Uzbekistan, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Moldova. The group was formed in 2001, Uzbekistan withdrew in 2005. The OSCE continues to mediate in the struggle between the Azerbaijani government and the ethnic Armenians of the Nagorno-Karabakh region. While Azerbaijan claims sovereignty over the region, the predominantly ethnic Armenian inhabitants are fighting for secession into Armenia. In environmental cooperation, Azerbaijan is part of the Basel Convention, the Convention on Biological Diversity, Ramsar sites, the London Convention, the Kyoto Protocol, and the Montreal Protocol. Economy. Azerbaijan is one of the oldest oil-producing regions of the world. Here in ancient times the Zoroastrians, for whom fire was a sacred symbol, built temples around the eternal fire.